Welcome to Module 4. In this module, we will look at the grammatical tenses that are used to make the habitual past, and these tenses are used to and would. Now, before we begin, I want you to think about a special memory that you have of a special person in your life. So think about a special person when you were young, and think about the memories that you had associated with them. So when you think about this person, what activities did you used to do with this person? When would you see them? Where would you see them? And why were they special to you? Now, I ask you this because this is something that we have been talking about with the listening already, and it's something that you are going to need to use for one of the activities later in this module. So as I mentioned, in the listening exercise that we did already, we heard Chloe talking about somebody in her life that was special to her, and that person was her grandmother. And one of the most important activities that they did together was cooking, and Chloe told us a lot about that and a lot about her grandmother. So let's look at some sentences that I've taken directly from the listening. So Chloe said, she used to try to tell me about acceptance and how to be a good human being. If you messed with her and she didn't think it was right, she would tell you. Now Chloe uses both of these sentences to talk about the memories that she has of her grandmother. Now what tenses does she use? I see two tenses. In the first one, I see used to. And in the second one, I see would. Now both used to and would combine together to create the habitual past. So let's look a little bit more at used to. Now, one of the main uses is that we use used to talk about habitual actions in the past that are not true now. And we use it to talk about repeated actions in the past. So how do we form it? It's very easy. We just use used to plus the base form. So for example, she used to try to tell me about acceptance and how to be a good human being. We have used to plus try, which is the base form of the verb to try. Okay, now let's look at the different forms. Let's first look at the positive form. So we form it by using subject plus used to plus base form. For example, Chloe used to cook with her mother. In the negative, we say subject plus didn't used to plus base form. So Chloe didn't used to clean with her mother. Now this is important to note. You'll see in the first positive sentence, used to has a D, but in the second, there is no D. So we take out the D and we say didn't used to, not didn't used to. Now they sound the same, but they are spelled differently. So we only use the D in the positive form. There's no D in the negative or question form. So to make the question form, we say did plus subject plus used to plus base form. So did Chloe used to cook with her grandmother? Yes, she did, or no, she didn't. Okay, so let's try to use this tense a little bit, and let's think about a special memory that you have, or that I have, and make sentences about the things that you used to do. So I will talk a little bit about my grandmother. I used to visit my grandmother every summer. I used to help her make dinner every evening. I didn't used to help my grandmother clean. We used to play in the lake. We used to visit every year for the 4th of July. And we didn't used to visit for Christmas. So I can use all of these tenses to talk about the activities and the things that I used to do with the special person in my life when I was a child. Okay, let's move on to would. Let's look at an example from the listening. So if you messed with her and she didn't think it was right, she would tell you. And I've got another example here. She'd get all the ingredients for a soup, and she'd look at it, and she'd go, now you see here, honey, this is how the world works. So first, let's look at the use. Would is very similar to used to, and we use both of them to talk about repeated actions in the past. We often use used to in we often use it with used to in order to talk about repeated actions or to list repeated actions in the past. If you look at the second example here, you can see that we're listing repeated actions in the past. She'd get all the ingredients for a soup, and she'd look at it, and she'd go. How do we form it? It's fairly easy. We just use would plus the base form. For example, if you messed with her and she didn't think it was right, she would tell you. Okay, let's look at the positive form. So we make it by using the subject plus would plus base form. For example, she would get all the ingredients. Now, we can also use the contracted form, she'd get. So instead of saying she would, you can just use apostrophe D, she'd get. For the negative, we just say wouldn't, subject plus wouldn't plus base form. She wouldn't get all the ingredients. And for the question, would plus subject plus base form. Would she get all the ingredients? Yes, she would, or no, she wouldn't. Note here, you need to say yes, she would, not yes, she did. Yes, she would, or no, she wouldn't. All right, so we can use both used to and would when we're telling stories or talking about memories from the past. One technique that you can use is you can start with used to and then move to would. For example, I used to visit my grandmother each summer. It was always very special. We would visit for the 4th of July. We would eat barbecue every night. We would swim in the lake, but we wouldn't help with the housework. So you can see here that I started the initial conversation using used to, but then when I went to list the activities and the different things that we used to do, I could easily use that with would. Now, remember, when we talk about memories, we often use both tenses. We don't just use used to, or we don't just use would. And you can use other phrases like every day, every week, every year to emphasize this repeated action. For example, you can see that above I said we would eat barbecue every night. One thing we don't do is we don't use would for the habitual past with stative verbs like be or have. For example, here we're using the verb to be, so you can say she used to be healthy, but you cannot say she would be healthy. Okay, well, thank you very much, and I hope this was useful for you and that you were able to apply it to the tasks later in this module.